mitzvah reunion, not of faiths, but of people who didn't get along. They're still divorced. But something happened afterwards where she was so eager to have that Jewish thing part of her child's life and to honor her Buddhist path with him. And that was for me a moment of understanding what port versus fort is about. I come from a halachic Orthodox background. I'm recently ordained from JTS. We were not talking about this issue at JTS on purpose because of the fear, because of the fort mentality. And along with other colleagues in mine, other movements, we are looking at building ports, going beyond the either or to an and both, where we have a win-win, where people like this child's mother, with the many people in my community, are invited in. And it's a scaffolding of trust that if we have something good to offer, and I agree with all my colleagues and friends here, we have something great to offer. We have a 5,000-year-old toolbox. Our bottom line is human being. Jewish serves to make that human universal message resonate. We got something to offer. And those families that come to us are seekers. Some of them are roamers. Maybe they're just looking for a one-night stand Yom Kippur. But they figure out that actually there's something here that speaks to my soul as a modern human being. And if the Jewish has anything to offer the universal in this smorgasbord digital urban madness that we're living in, then bring it on. And the win-win is a win. The member of the family who is embracing the spiritual, maybe the Jewish, I believe, has something to find that will make them a happier, content, better person, better lover, better parent, better citizen, without demanding a conversion. It's not either or. It's and both. It's fluid. It's tricky. We've survived 5,000 years of flux. We can do this. And perhaps if we have another round later, I think one of the things that some of us are talking about is the notion of not either or in Jew, non-Jew, but the middle category. What was known for our ancestors as Ger Toshav, the resident alien, the someone who's with us in the family. And that is an idea that is getting more traction in this fluid both and reality.
Agreed. I love what everybody's putting forth. Maybe placing some of my own vocabulary around it might reiterate some of these pieces perhaps in a different way. In my work with couples on the ground in the Bay Area who are coming from different backgrounds, I often think about Judaism as relevance. In much the way that some of you spoke, that it is not because I need you to do this for whatever reasons, and we have a long list in Judaism of what those are, but rather because this is something that I believe is coming from this deep wisdom that is actually relevant to your life, relevant to your child rearing, all of those pieces, that there is a need for stopping to mark time. There was a need to not have life flowing by so quickly that you can't figure out what it is that you're doing here anyway. There is a need for appreciating and having gratitude practice in your life. In my mind, Judaism is one big gratitude practice. That's what it is. So we might do it in different ways and talk about it in different ways, but at the end of the day, I think all of our prayer, most of our ritual, etc., is trying to get us to stop and notice. When I talk about it that way, I rarely have people say, no, I do not want that. I do not want that in my life, or I really already have that, I'm good. That's something that I think a lot of people are striving for, and the more that I can just talk about Judaism as something that can be relevant, or a spiritual path in general, that can highlight those pieces of our busy, crazy lives in positive ways, can really resonate. Most of the work, a lot of the work I would say that I do in the Bay Area is talking to people who hate religion in general. And so there are a lot of nods, and I think that that is, in a way, a universal. It might be even more pronounced where I live, which is the highest unaffiliated rate across the country in any religion. So most people have, in a couple, at least one, if not two people, who hate religion. And I hate religion for all the reasons they hate religion. So a lot of my work is talking about these ways that we can enter in to a conversation about what is deeply meaningful in our lives and what is lacking. And rather than saying, I hate our religion, therefore it's over here, what is it actually, what was it that caused humans to create systems like this, and what might we need from it, and what might it look like? Can we be expansive enough to talk about what that can be without needing you to sign on the dotted line I like the both and rather than either or, which is usually what we're saying to people. Either or, and draw your boundaries and you're in or you're out, which is a huge problem. I talk to couples all the time about ger toshav and other kinds of categories. It's not even the only one throughout our long history where we've had different ways of talking about people who were along for the ride, who were fellow travelers in some way. So I think that when I hear from couples about what is attractive about Judaism, I often hear some of the things I just talked about around gratitude, etc. But I also hear that Judaism focuses on the other, that we challenge and that we encourage challenging. That is very attractive to people depending on what kind of tradition they came from. That we tend to be non-dogmatic, that it's a home family practice, it's something that you can do on your own at home. Tikkun olam, repairing the world. So often when I talk to them, I remember all these really cool things that are just beautiful about our tradition, what makes it distinctive, which is not to say that other traditions don't hold those pieces, but they're finding it within this path, and it enlightens me as well. So overall, I see my own goal is to help people have a spiritual life that language might not work for them, but at the end of the day, that's what I'm doing, and it doesn't necessarily have to have a Jewish label on it. I'm hoping that I open people up to a deeper conversation in their lives and figure out how to get there.
Thank you all. I want to call next on Rabbi Nadia.
Hi, everyone. So I want to begin by saying amen. Thank you all for everything that you have shared. And, I think that to be a person of faith is to respond with faith and trust as opposed to fear in times that are changing. And we live in changing times that are probably as radical and profound as when the Talmud was being created. And so it's really exciting. And I think that it's important to be open to recognizing the sacredness in every person and in every path, and recognizing that each of us only have a part of a larger whole, that we all worship and serve the one who has no name and who is greater than all of our respective religions that are different languages that speak to that sacredness. And one of the things that I have proud to have done with my colleague, Rabbi Lerner, is to have been one of the founding board members of the Society of Classical Reform Judaism. We were started in 2008, and our mission is to preserve and advocate for the progressive, liberal, inclusive heritage that is part of the founding of the Reform movement, and to reaffirm our place within the larger Reformed Jewish and Jewish conversation. We advocate for an unconditional, inclusive welcome of interfaith families, including the celebration of their marriages, and we advocate for liberal and inclusive practices, including worship language that is accessible to all. And so we have done research specific to finding the ways in which we can prove through data, as opposed to dialogue, my opinion, your opinion, that data is actually supporting the fact that we can predict for interfaith families as well as for Jews overall worship satisfaction, that it can be predicted based on ability to read Hebrew or whether they feel like they lack Hebrew skills. We can also predict their likelihood of becoming a member of a synagogue based on Hebrew language as well as certain practices such as whether or not a Jew is welcome unconditionally on the bima. So that is some of what we're doing. Come check us out. If you want to participate in the link to our research study, it is on the app and it'll be on Facebook on interfaithfamily.com starting tomorrow.
Great.
Thanks.
So I have a couple of questions. I'm going to mix up the order a little bit. So several of you mentioned in previous conversations that we've had and here today the need to be open to other traditions, to the possibility of being moved by other traditions and not being afraid of them. So say a little bit more about what that means and what then happens to Judaism as we know it. Does anyone want to start us off?
So my academic background long ago is actually in the field of religious studies and comparative religion, and I have an abiding interest in the fact that this is a society in which we have a laboratory of multiple religions interacting, sometimes not in the ways that we might desire, but hopefully more often than not going forward because of the growing, I think, recognition that we benefit from having multiple religious traditions available to us as a society in positive ways. And I think that we as Jews, particularly as a religious community that for much of our history was excluded in many societies, should be champions of the notion that, in fact, we all benefit from the fact that there are multiple religious traditions with different wisdom traditions, different practices from which we can learn. And as a practical matter, historically, I think anybody who looks honestly at Jewish history would have to argue, and it's certainly been argued, that Jewish tradition has benefited over the many centuries from our interactions with other religious traditions, even going back to our interactions with the pagan religious traditions that we so eagerly and forcefully sought to differentiate ourselves from. I think today, just as a practical matter, we're living at a time when people are going to, as was said here on the panel, people are going to seek wisdom where they can find it. People are going to seek things that work in their lives, that add richness to their lives, that add nobility to their lives. I believe that for many people, being able to connect those back to, if we want to use the metaphor, a single language that is the language with which they are most comfortable, the language that they speak as their vernacular, if you will make sense. That is to say that for most people, it will be a matter of weaving together strands that are nonetheless part of adding to a single tradition. Some people may find that they're comfortable in a much more eclectic religious identity. But the big point, the one that Amichai made and that others have made, is this is not something to fear. We do not need to worry. If I can do a little shameless self-advertising, on December 14th in New York, for those of you who will have access to it, there's going to be a Jewish Futures Conference being put on by the Jewish Education Project and our foundation, the title of which is Happiness Hacks, Feel Good, Do Good, and Stop Obsessing About Jewish Identity. And that, I think, is the real message for today. We don't have to worry about being polluted or diluted by other wisdoms. We will only be enriched by them.
I'll add, I love the concept we use the word shalom quite a bit. The root of shalom is wholeness. So when we